Hey there, I truly appreciate you taking the time to check out this video. If you decide to hit that subscribe button, it would honestly mean a lot. But let's not waste time. Let's get into it. My name is Dr. Logan Carter. The night I looked my wife in the eye and said, "If you leave now, don't bother coming back." I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I wasn't creating a scene. I had simply reached the point where silence was no longer an option. That night wasn't about one major event. It was the breaking point of countless small fractures that had been building for years. For a long time, I kept giving until I could hardly recognize the life I was living. By the time I met Aubrey Mitchell, I had just finished medical school. I was ambitious but exhausted, drowning in $180,000 of debt and barely keeping my head above water. My life was a blur of overnight shifts, non-stop rotations, and bone-deep fatigue. That stethoscope I wore daily became less of a tool and more of a mask. I buried my dreams under layers of exhaustion. Then there was Aubrey, magnetic, elegant, effortlessly engaging. She worked at a high-end boutique in one of Dallas's luxury retail centers and could sell a four-figure handbag to someone who only came in to browse. She charmed everyone she met. I was no different. Her gaze had this pull. It made you feel like the center of her world. In the beginning, she made me believe I mattered, that I wasn't just another overworked resident fading into the hospital walls. She showed up when I needed her most. Late-night takeout runs, surprise notes tucked in my scrubs, tiny reminders that I wasn't alone in the chaos. I remember once, after a brutal 36-hour shift, she waited outside the hospital just to drive me home. We got married not long after. It was a modest ceremony in an old chapel. Her sister Reese dabbed at her tears. My brother Zane cracked bad jokes that made us laugh through the nerves. The vows were standard, but we meant every word. Love, honesty, patience, growth. I believed we could make those vows real. But life rarely plays out the way we imagine it will. In the early years, I threw myself into work. My focus was laser sharp. Eliminate debt, build financial security, give us a stable future. I skipped vacations, pulled double shifts, slept wherever I could. Hospital couches, my car, sometimes not at all. I was determined to be debt-free by 30, to buy our house outright, to raise a family without money being a constant shadow. She claimed to be on board, but now I know she never fully was. When I suggested we delay starting a family until we had more financial footing, she hesitated. "You always have a plan," she whispered. "When do we actually live?" I told her we would live, just not yet, not until we were ready. But she didn't want to wait. She wanted spontaneity. Children now, a home now, trips, moments. She wanted the present. I wanted the future. To show her love, I compromised. I bought the house, took on more hours, said yes to all of her dreams, custom flooring, imported counters, luxury appliances, closets designed down to the last detail. I was barely around, but the mortgage was paid, and the lights were always on. By the time our third anniversary came, something had shifted. The woman who once lit up at the sight of me barely looked my way. I'd come home late. She was asleep. I'd leave before dawn. She wouldn't move. At first, I blamed the routine, the fatigue. We were both running on fumes. But then I noticed odd things. Perfume I didn't recognize on her gym clothes. Spontaneous weekend visits to a cousin who had actually moved across the country a year earlier. She began guarding her phone, then ignoring my messages during breaks. Eventually, I stopped texting. She didn't seem to care. I remember the exact moment I knew something wasn't right. I got home earlier than usual and heard her voice. She was on a call in the living room laughing, playfully, warmly, in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Stop it! You're awful!" She giggled, her tone unmistakably flirty. There was a pause, muffled words, a lingering smile. When she noticed me standing there, she froze for just a second, then gave a too-fast smile. "Reese," she said. "She's tipsy." I didn't challenge her, just nodded. I was too drained to argue. A week later, I pulled the activity logs from our smart lock. We each had our own codes. Mine. Heron. And then, one I didn't recognize, entered twice during my overnight shifts. That's when I hired a PI. I told myself it was paranoid, distrustful, but I knew the signs. Betrayal leaves a scent. It clung to the walls of our home. For nearly 4 weeks, I said nothing. I smiled, bought flowers, pretended. All the while, I waited for confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. Then came Monday. The evidence arrived. Pictures, videos, receipts. Aubrey had been seeing Graham Keller, a real estate CEO on the rise. He was married, 2 kids, owned a condo downtown. They weren't even careful. They met just blocks from our house, our coffee shop, a nearby hotel. I stared at those files for hours. Then I closed the folder. No confrontation, no shouting, just clarity. I wouldn't beg, wouldn't ask for reasons. I just needed one more mistake from her. She gave me that opening the following Friday. She came downstairs in a sleek black dress I hadn't seen in ages. "Heading out," she said, emotionless. I stood up, heart racing. "If you walk out now," I said, "don't expect to come back." She sighed. "Don't do this, Logan." I looked at her. "This isn't the beginning of anything. It's the end." She left anyway. While she was out playing her part in someone else's story, I got to work. I called my lawyer, reserved a suite, set every step in motion. She thought I was broken, that I'd just keep taking it. What she didn't know was that I had already spoken with Graham's wife, that every move she'd made had been carefully documented. She had no idea what was coming. That night, I didn't return home. Instead, I sat in a downtown hotel room reviewing legal paperwork my attorney had sent. Everything, our house, our finances, our assets, was in my name. Years ago, I'd insisted on handling all the contracts myself, not because I didn't trust her, but because I couldn't stand disorganization. That meticulousness turned out to be my protection. At 3:14 a.m., my phone vibrated. A message from Aubrey. "Where are you?" I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, "I came home and you're gone. Logan?" Still nothing. Not to scare her, but to let the silence do the work. She hated silence more than anything. By dawn, there were 6 messages. One pleading, another accusing me of overreacting. I got up, showered, straightened my tie, and drove to my attorney's office. Melissa Braxton, sharp, brilliant, absolutely ruthless, was already waiting, coffee in hand. "You sure you're ready?" she asked. I nodded. "I've been ready since the day my wife looked at someone else the way she used to look at me." We submitted the documents that morning. By the next afternoon, Aubrey was handed the papers right at her workplace. Her beloved showroom brimming with artisan glass and stone, the space she flaunted like it was an extension of her own ego. I knew it would sting. Her pride had always been rooted in perception. She didn't reach out right away. She waited until her doors had closed for the day. When she finally called, her voice trembled, breath catching between syllables. "You actually filed for divorce?" she asked, her tone tight with disbelief. "I did," I replied, measured and steady. "You asked for freedom. I'm simply honoring that." There was a long silence. "You don't have to go through with this," she said eventually. "You already made your decisions," I told her. "Now I'm making mine." Then I sent her everything. Images, messages, time logs, every shred of evidence the investigator had compiled. I heard the hitch in her breath as she opened the file. "You had me followed?" she asked, voice brittle. "No," I said. "I followed the facts." For once, she had no retort. In that silence, I could almost hear the narrative she'd constructed crumble beneath her. She'd spent years believing she could live a double life without ever paying a price. But now, both lives were colliding, and I was the one holding the match. Later that week, I met with Callie Keller, Graham's wife. She looked worn, younger than Aubrey, but exhausted, a toddler resting on her hip, dark circles haunting her eyes. She didn't cry, didn't rage. She just studied the material I gave her, quietly absorbing it all. "I always suspected," she murmured, "but I didn't want to face it." I handed her a flash drive packed with the evidence. Together, we drafted a plan. Because Graham wasn't just being unfaithful, he was funneling money into hotel trysts under the company's name. Several receipts bore the insignia of Keller and Finch Properties, a firm valued in the millions. This wasn't just personal betrayal, it was financial misconduct, scandalous, illegal, and now actionable. In the meantime, Aubrey began to spiral. She bombarded my email with emotional messages. She even showed up at the hospital where I used to work, pretending she just wanted a conversation. But I didn't engage. I gave her what she'd given me for years: distance and indifference. I wasn't aiming to publicly destroy her, at least not yet. But I made my stance unmistakably clear. If she refused an amicable divorce, waived spousal support, and didn't walk away quietly, I'd let everything come to light. At first, she tried to keep the upper hand, but in the end, she relented, because above all else, Aubrey worshipped her reputation. She signed within a week, but I wasn't done. The house, my investment, my sweat equity, was now solely in my name. She packed hastily, taking only what she could carry, and left. That night, I changed the locks. And for the first time in almost a decade, I slept. Deep, uninterrupted sleep. No anxiety, no pretending, no more navigating emotional landmines in my own space. But this story isn't just about a failed marriage. It's about consequences. And Aubrey's chapter? That was just the introduction. A month after the divorce was finalized, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. The subject line read, "You weren't her only secret." Attached was a video, Aubrey in another city, laughing over dinner with yet another man. Not Graham, someone else entirely. It wasn't a single betrayal, it was a pattern, a lifestyle. I smiled. I'd already begun piecing my life back together, cutting back hours at work, reconnecting with old friends, even getting back into the gym. I had plans, but now I also had purpose. Because some stories don't conclude with signed papers, some only end with accountability. And Aubrey Mitchell hadn't faced hers, not yet. 6 weeks later, as I exited the gym, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Logan Carter?" a voice asked. "Yes, this is Detective Warren with the Dallas Metro Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding a woman named Aubrey Mitchell." I didn't react with fear, just curiosity. I agreed to come in the next day. At the station, the detective offered me coffee. I declined. He pushed a file across the table. "Were you aware that your ex-wife is under investigation for insurance fraud?" I raised an eyebrow. Turns out, just before we split, Aubrey had submitted 2 fraudulent claims, one for an allegedly stolen $15,000 handbag and another for vintage jewelry she claimed was lost in shipping. No receipts, no evidence, just her testimony. Thanks to an insider at the insurance company, someone who had finally decided to speak out, the case had been reopened. I told him the truth. We hadn't communicated beyond legal matters. I had no idea what she was up to, but inwardly I felt a sense of resolution. She thought she could walk away unscathed. But the consequences she evaded were catching up, and fate had handed me the final word. 2 days later, I was invited to speak at a Texas Medical Foundation gala, an event attended by physicians, donors, and executives from around the state. That's when I saw her, Aubrey, draped in red satin, clinging to Graham's arm as though none of it had ever happened. She didn't spot me immediately, but the moment she did, mid-sip, she choked. I lifted my glass and smiled, slowly, intentionally. She froze. Graham turned to see what had startled her, then looked at me. Recognition dawned, followed by panic. He thought I had let it all go, thought I had no evidence, that I'd moved on quietly, but he didn't know I'd saved copies. Didn't know Callie had retained legal representation. Didn't know I had a friend in journalism who thrived on breaking scandals. The next morning, an anonymous tip landed in the inbox of the Dallas Ledger. It included expense reports, travel logs matching Aubrey's movements, and blurry surveillance images of the two entering a luxury hotel during office hours billed as corporate meetings. Within 3 days, Keller and Finch placed Graham on administrative leave pending an investigation. By the end of the week, he had discreetly resigned. And Aubrey? She vanished from public view, but her downfall had only just begun. As for me, I kept moving forward. I bought a classic car, something I'd always wanted. I began volunteering at a community clinic, helping families who needed it most. In the evenings, I'd walk my dog along the trails I hadn't visited since college. And for the first time in a long while, my life, my future belonged entirely to me. Something I hadn't planned for occurred. I met someone unexpected. Her name was Rachel. She worked as a trauma therapist and carried herself with a gentle tone and a razor-sharp mind. From our first meeting, there was a quiet strength in her that stood out. She wasn't loud, didn't seek approval, and didn't pretend to fix anyone. She was simply real. What started casually began to deepen. A few coffees turned into shared dinners, which turned into hours of intimate, open conversation. In time, something meaningful began to take root. One evening, I let everything out. I told her everything: the overwhelming financial strain, the exhausting schedule, the betrayal that ended my marriage. She didn't flinch. She didn't pity me. She just listened, deeply and without judgment. Then she said something that stayed with me. "You didn't fail. You just gave more than someone knew how to receive." That line echoed in my mind for weeks. For the first time in a long time, I began to wonder if maybe I still deserved something good. But the universe wasn't done throwing curveballs just yet. Not long after, I got a message from Callie. She'd sent over a video, security footage from a parking garage. Graham and Aubrey were in the middle of a blowout. His face was flushed, his hands moving wildly. He slammed the car door shut while she yelled something indecipherable. Then he peeled out of the lot, leaving her behind. Callie filled in the rest. Graham had discovered that Aubrey was seeing someone new, a contractor named Jordan she met during renovations on his vacation place. The irony was savage. Graham had upended his life for her, his wife, his job, his home. And in the end, she betrayed him too. Karma doesn't always arrive when you expect it, but it never forgets where you live. By then, Aubrey had lost her standing. People who once admired her now kept their distance. Her reputation began to crumble. Whispers turned into full-blown gossip. And then the final blow landed. The IRS had opened a case on her finances. Her house of cards was collapsing. Her lies had caught up. She was left alone, exposed, and forced to face everything she'd tried so hard to bury. But I didn't feel vindicated. I wasn't chasing revenge. I didn't need her ruin to prove my own growth. I felt whole again, not because she fell, but because I chose to rise. I chose to heal, to trade bitterness for peace. I learned that real power isn't found in vengeance. It's found in living well beyond the reach of those who tried to undo you. Time passed. My life settled into something steady. I still worked part-time. Rachel and I kept spending time together. And for the first time in ages, I wasn't anxious all the time. I wasn't glued to notifications. I didn't flinch walking through my front door. Then, one evening, a handwritten envelope showed up. It was from Aubrey. The letter began, "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I've been reflecting. I was reckless. I was selfish. And I finally see it." She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't defend herself. She just laid it bare. I never replied. I didn't feel the need. I had already let her go the night she chose someone else over the life we'd built. Oddly enough, the letter didn't stir up old anger. Instead, it gave me a strange kind of closure. She was finally looking at her own reflection, not to win me back, but to face herself. That, in its own way, was growth. By then, Rachel and I had been together for close to 6 months. No grand gestures, no dramatic highs and lows, just quiet consistency. One rainy afternoon, we were sitting on the porch, sipping coffee. She looked at me and asked, Do you ever think about what you'd say to her now? I answered without hesitation. I already said it, the night I didn't answer the phone. She smiled. Then you're finally free. And she was right. I was free. Not just from Aubrey, but from the version of myself that believed love meant endless self-sacrifice, even when it hurt. About a week later, Callie reached out again. Rumor had it Aubrey tried reconnecting with Graham after her affair collapsed. He wanted nothing to do with her. Word on the street was she was relocating to Chicago for a fresh start. I didn't care. That door had closed for good. Exactly 1 year after our divorce was finalized, I stood outside my home, and realized something profound. Yes, she'd left with pieces of me. But I had rebuilt from the wreckage, stronger, wiser, and finally able to recognize what love is supposed to look like, the kind that uplifts instead of diminishes. Some endings aren't punishment. They're rescue missions. You just don't realize it when you're still inside the blaze. 16 months after she walked out, I found myself beside a quiet lake at sunset. Rachel leaned into my side as the sky turned gold and amber. She was still, grounded, real. I never thought peace could feel like this, I said quietly. That's because chaos felt normal for too long, she replied. She wasn't wrong. It had taken every ounce of patience, every moment of pain, and every truth I'd avoided to get to that shore. But I made it. And Aubrey? I hadn't spoken her name in months. That silence, that peace, was the real victory. Later, I heard she'd built a lifestyle brand in Chicago. New aesthetic, new quotes, new life. Her feed was filled with generic affirmations about healing and new beginnings. But from what I was told, she was still running. From her choices, from the aftermath. Her captions read things like, "Healing isn't linear," but the audience who once watched closely had long since tuned out, just like I had. The last thing she ever sent me was a short message. "I'm sorry, for everything." I didn't answer, because it was no longer about her. It was about the man I'd become without her, more grounded, more resilient, fully whole. Now, Rachel and I lead a quiet life. We travel together. We laugh often. We cook dinner side by side. We take long walks with our dog in the evenings. No drama, no suspicion. Just two people learning how to love without losing who they are. And that's where this chapter ends. Thanks for listening. If this story resonated with you, feel free to explore the others here. Until next time, take care of yourself.